two-vehicle crash causes major injuries. With no ships in sight, the port hosts its annual navigation luncheon. And the province moves to boost the moose population.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. Old Man Winter returned with a vengeance today, and the April snowstorm led to at least a dozen crashes around the city. The most serious one was a head-on collision on West Arthur Street. The crash happened around the noon hour and sent two people to hospital with what were described as serious injuries. A car and an SUV collided near the Maple Ward Road turnoff. The two drivers, a man and a woman, were the lone occupants of the vehicles. Both had to be extricated by Thunder Bay Fire Rescue crews and were taken to the regional hospital. City police say the injuries are non-life-threatening. Fire Captain John Kaplanis believes one vehicle was traveling westbound and the other eastbound when they collided.
Well, there's no doubt the weather conditions are pretty bad right now, so that's a contributing factor to the crash. And yeah, if people could slow down in conditions like this, certainly these incidents would be occurring a lot less.
The extent of the injuries is unknown. Arthur Street was shut down in both directions for roughly 1 hour. Fiona will have more on this winter storm a little later on in the News Hour.
Well, it may be the latest start in Thunder Bay's history for the local shipping season, but local port officials were focusing on the positives at today's annual navigation luncheon. The grain monitor for the federal government was the special guest this year, and he says Thunder Bay will be relied upon heavily to move last year's record grain crop. Jonathan Wilson reports.
Well, the elephant in the room here is that navigation isn't really open yet, and this is the opening of navigation lunch.
Port Authority CEO Tim Heaney has said he's never seen a winter like this one, with Lake Superior ice still up to 4 feet thick in some areas. The Arctic icebreaker, the Pierre Radisson, is currently leading a convoy of U.S. ships to Sault Ste. Marie and will be back in a few days, escorting the first vessels of the year to the local port.
Things are improving, and we're hoping to see some ships perhaps by the weekend, depending on the effect of the storm that we're currently having. But keep our fingers crossed, maybe we'll see the first grain ships by Monday.
The ice on the Great Lakes hasn't been the only thing holding up Canada's largest ever grain harvest. The bitter cold on the prairies this winter has done its share of damage as well, according to Mark Hems, the federal government's point man on getting the grain moving.
Yeah, we've had a real problem this year, and it's been a combination of things between cold weather, obviously, and congestion at all of the ports, and it's largely been caused by the inability of the railways to kind of dig themselves out of a really, really bad spot with the weather that they've had to contend with this winter.
Hems and Heaney say brighter days are ahead once the snow and ice are finally gone.
But I think as we move into the spring, I think people's mindsets will change to a more positive tone, and I see this probably being one of the best shipping seasons that we've ever seen. Well, at least in the last 10 to 15 years. We'll move a lot of grain.
Yes, the elevators are actually starting to get near capacity, so they're starting to fill up now. There's a fair amount in storage, and we're ready to go, so we just need those ships to keep it moving.
Hem says there will be a big reliance on Thunder Bay to move the record crop, estimated at around 20 million tons. The real key will be clearing that backlog and getting ready for next fall's crop, which he hopes is a bit smaller.
If we saw a crop like that again, we'd be having this many troubles, and even then some.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
Ontario hunters are facing a big reduction in moose tags for this fall, and one of the worst hit areas is the Wildlife Management Unit closest to Thunder Bay, which will see an 87% cut in adult moose tags. The Ministry of Natural Resources says it's in response to a noticeable reduction in the moose population in many parts of the north. Phil Darlington has the story.
Wildlife experts with the Ministry of Natural Resources say there are many factors which can dwindle the moose population. Climate change and predation are just two of the main ones, and the reduction in the number of calves is a big contributing factor.
On the productivity side, you can look at how many calves are coming into the population as well. So if you do have low calf recruitment, that will also decline.
Well, one of the
factors attributed to the decline of our moose population is the fact that calf recruitment and calf productivity, if you will, is not what it used to be 10 years ago.
Kaplanis and the Sportsman Alliance say more research needs to be done with the MNR to determine why the population is declining and how to reverse it. There is, of course, an argument that hunting is responsible for a decline in the population, but it is not being looked at as the primary reason.
Looking at population demographics, we are moving to reduce bull tags relative to cow tags, and as harvest is a likely factor, a contributing factor, but not, likely the sole factor.
Hunters acknowledge that, and we play a conservation role, and we'll do our part to see that moose management turns around and that the population goes upward, because after all, our moose hunting future for my children, my grandchildren, depends upon what we do today to improve the moose population.
Across Ontario, the number of moose tags being made available will drop by about 18%. The Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters says it was shocked by the announcement and says that the MNR should have looked at all other management options before hitting moose hunters so hard. Phil Darlington, TBT News.
Elsewhere, 2 animal rights groups are taking the Ontario government to court in an attempt to stop the planned spring bear hunt before it begins. Animal Alliance of Canada and ZooCheck Canada have filed an application for a judicial review and a notice of constitutional question, which are set to be heard in court on April 29th. The Wynne government says a pilot project to reinstate the spring bear hunt will start May 1st and run for 6 weeks in 8 wildlife areas, including here in Thunder Bay. The animal rights groups are hoping the court will at least delay the start of the hunt until it can rule on their legal actions. The hunt was canceled back in 1999 by the Harris government, which said it was the only acceptable way to ensure bear cubs weren't being orphaned. The Ontario Federation of Anglers and Hunters says it doesn't want big city animal rights extremists to derail the hunt. The Wynne government says the pilot project is being carried out in response to growing complaints about nuisance bears and the impact on public safety in the north.
A suspect is in custody following an overnight break and enter on the city's south side. Police arrived at a Hamilton Avenue address to see a young man running from the scene. He was taken into custody following a short foot chase. The 22-year-old, who is reportedly well known to police, has been charged with break and enter and resisting arrest. Police are also requesting residents in the Walsh and Franklin Street area to report any articles that may have gone missing from their vehicles.
The latest version of the Harper government's First Nations education bill is still not what First Nations people are looking for. Ontario Regional Chief Stan Beardy says the new bill does nothing to address the conditions raised by the Assembly of First Nations Chiefs. Mike Albanese has that story.
We came to the conclusion that it does not necessarily address our perspective of control of education.
Regional Chief Stan Beardy isn't afraid to speak out on his frustrations when it comes to the new First Nation education bill. This stems from a meeting back in the fall when the Ontario Chiefs Assembly was held, and a united decision to reject the federal proposal on the First Nations Education Act was decided. This was done to try and assure they would have control over their own education system. Now that a new bill has been released with still no input from First Nations chiefs, there are even more discrepancies. Beardy says until proper consultation takes place between the government and the First Nations people, no new bill will solve anything.
What I'm suggesting here is that I'm told the old effort, the First Nation Act, is a dead issue. This is a new bill. Therefore, I feel that we need to have proper consultation with the target group, First Nation people, to make sure this is what we're looking for to improve access to quality education for our young people.
Beardy says in December they came up with 5 conditions for the new bill, and none were included. He understands their jurisdiction will have to interlink with provincial standards, but they also need the control to decide what's best for their future children. And they know that when decisions were made without their input in the past, nothing went right.
If First Nation people do well, all of Canada will do well. And I think that's the investment we're looking for. We're looking for support from the rest of the society to make sure that our perspectives of what education means to us is what we're trying to push forward. It's not aside from outside anything else. It's to integrate into larger society, but at the same time maintain our cultural identity.
Beardy went on to say that First Nations have much more innovative ideas on how a collaborative approach would serve their students better, but that can't happen until they are involved in the direction of the bill. Mike Albanese, TBT News.
Employers in the natural resources sector are not finding the skills they're looking for in the people applying for jobs. A new study by the North Superior Workforce Planning Board has found a shortage of skilled workers in the region, but the mismatch is also being felt by job seekers. The study was released today and included interviews with 36 employers in the region. A long list of skills potential employees are looking for was compiled. A good attitude, time management, and the ability to work independently were just a few. Workforce Planning Board Executive Director Madge Richardson says employees are expected to do a lot more with less in today's world.
I think the expectations are growing of what they require their employees to be able to perform when they get there. So perhaps it's changed over time, and perhaps some of the programs in preparing people in school or for workforce haven't really kept up with the demands or the requirements of what employers really need.
Richardson says it's going to take a collaborative effort to get beyond the mismatch. The report recommends incorporating life skills on the job training, school curriculum, and experimental learning.
Rising food bank use, shrinking farmland, and a loss of basic cooking skills are all things a new strategy is aiming to tackle. A Thunder Bay area food strategy is in the works, and last night people were asked to weigh in on the plan. Those working on the project believe it will benefit the entire region when implemented. Thunder Bay is one of 64 municipalities in the country looking to improve their local food system. Strategy Coordinator Kendall Donahue says there's a lot of food that can be produced locally that's currently being imported.
Things like grains for breads, we do tomatoes, we do potatoes, we do beef, we can do chickens. We don't have a local abattoir right now for chickens, so we're bringing all that in from elsewhere, dairy, so there's a lot that we can actually do here.
Erin Beagle is the coordinator of Roots to Harvest, an organization that gets youth involved in farming and gardening. She believes the food strategy is getting everyone on the same page, working towards common goals.
Urban agriculture, or how to get new farmers into our area, and I think that some of those things have been needed for a long time, that we have a high potential in Thunder Bay and area, like our region, to be a major food producing, innovative place.
Feedback from last night's meeting will help to refine recommendations that will then be presented to area councils in June. And a 71-year-old Dryden woman is the region's newest millionaire. Marie Martin actually bought her Lotto 649 ticket here in Thunder Bay. She says she thought she won $10,000 until the retailer showed her a slip that said it was worth $1 million. The mother of 6 and grandmother of 10 says she will invest her winnings and keep the money in the family.
Magnus Theatre is back with its latest production. The romantic comedy, Same Time Next Year, was written by Bernard Slade. It focuses the love life of Doris and George, but with a strange twist. Rochelle Sufi brings us this preview.
This is the very first time I've done this.
Don't worry, I could tell. Do you mind if I have some of your breakfast?
Same Time Next Year is written by Canadian playwright Bernard Slade. The strange twist is, despite Doris and George both being happily married to other people, they continue to meet up once a year for the next 25 years.
It's that love at first sight. They're soulmates, and it's kismet, it's fate.
Doris, do you believe that two perfect strangers?
The show opens in 1951 and continues until 1975, depicted in 6 scenes, which gives the audience a fun and provocative look at two people over time. Doris and George are portrayed by real-life husband and wife team Liz Gilroy and Scott Mudsley. Gilroy says that it was very fun to be able to play the characters through 20 years.
Really change with the 60s and 70s. They sort of embrace the time period and go a whole hog into that hippie phase, that whole phase. It's really fun to meet that challenge. I never saw anybody do that before. What made you do it?
Impulse.
The gala opening is Friday night, and the play runs until May 3rd. Rochelle Sufi, TBT News.
Well, let's turn to weather now, Phil. Great way to bring in a long weekend. Everybody heads home and they get the shovel.
Yeah, that storm was expected, and well, I can imagine that most people probably weren't too happy to be dealing with snow in the middle of April, but there is some good news for everyone coming up into the weekend. What we actually did see over the course of the day was some cold air mixing with some precipitation coming up from the United States. and that was sort of hovering in and around the northwestern portion of Lake Superior, giving us that system. And actually, for the majority of the day, we were seeing a snowfall warning, at times hitting up to 15 centimeters of snow. I know that's maybe a little bit more common for April, but still, I'm sure no one likes it. We were also below seasonal temperatures, only reaching our daytime high of 0 degrees later in the afternoon. Winds were relatively stable for most of the day out of the east-northeast at 19 kilometers an hour, but winds at times were also hitting 44 kilometers an hour, making the snow a little bit less comfortable. That general warm-up trend late into the day was quite common across the northwestern region. At this hour, Fort Frances and Kenora are hovering just above the freezing mark under partially cloudy skies. Similar conditions up near Pickle Lake and Big Trout Lake. Over down at Sault Ste. Marie, they're hitting 3 degrees right now under partially cloudy skies. And Marathon and Greenstone are just above the freezing mark, but they're going to continue to see some snow as we move on into Friday. Overnight tonight, temperatures will continue to drop as the sun disappears. However, the precipitation will taper off, giving us partly cloudy skies, which I'm sure everyone is very thankful for. And the winds will change direction coming out of the northwest, but also calm down a little bit, hovering between 11 and 17 kilometers an hour, which is very nice moving into Good Friday, where we will see chilly air come in from northern Ontario. Like I said, Greenstone can expect to see a little bit more precipitation tomorrow, not too much. Most of the region will be clear for the end of the week, but there is some warm air mixing with precipitation from northern Canada, which I will tell you more about later on in the news hour.
All right, thanks very much, Phil. Well, a key ruling from the Court of Appeal today, a controversial ruling that could impact the rights of hundreds of thousands of Canadians. Details on that story and more for you as your Thursday News Hour continues.
I'm very pleased that the Federal Court of Appeal agreed that Métis Indians
Ruling today from the Federal Court of Appeal that could affect hundreds of thousands of people.
It upholds part of a lower court ruling that Métis people be included as Indians under the Constitution. Julie Van Dusen has more on today's controversial decision.
Representatives for the Métis and non-status Indians welcome the decision.
I'm very pleased that the Federal Court of Appeal agreed that Métis are Indians. We are equally pleased that the government conceded that non-status Indians are a federal jurisdiction.
Today, the Court of Appeal ruled that Métis are considered Indians, but didn't say the same for non-status Indians because it says the government already conceded that in court.
Métis and non-status Indians have never been granted the same recognition and rights as those provided status Indians living on reserve. They have been shut out for far too long.
If the ruling is unchallenged, it will expand Ottawa's responsibilities for hundreds of thousands of Aboriginal people in Canada who are not affiliated with First Nations and have essentially no access to their programs.
It's going to improve the living conditions of off-reserve Aboriginal peoples.
The provinces in Ottawa have been fighting for decades about who is responsible for their services.
The provinces said, well, no, they're Indians. You have to pay for them. And Canada said, well, they're not Indians. You have to pay for them. They're provincial citizens.
So historically, it's you look at it, we've been struggling to trying to find our place in Confederation and find our place within the framework of the Constitution. And I think this sets it very clear.
Even though the ruling says the federal government is responsible for Métis and non-status Indians, what they will gain will have to be negotiated.
What does this mean in the long term? That's going to be more court battles and more court cases. I'm certain about this.
In response to the ruling, the federal government says, quote, "Our priority is to create jobs, economic growth, and long-term prosperity for all Canadians, including Métis." It says it's reviewing the decision to determine next steps. Julie Van Dusen, CBC News, Ottawa.
Prime Minister Stephen Harper announced today that Canada is sending fighter jets and military staff to work with NATO. 6 CF-18s will be stationed in Poland. Harper says it's in response to concerns about expansionism and militarism on the part of Russia. Here's some of what the Prime Minister had to say.
I believe this to be a long-term, serious threat to global peace and security, and we're always prepared to work with our allies in NATO and elsewhere to try and bring whatever stability we can to the situation. So I appreciate
Diplomatic talks in Geneva aimed at de-escalating tensions in Ukraine ended in agreement today. Russia and Ukraine were both part of the meetings, along with the U.S. and the European Union. That agreement prompted both optimism and skepticism, but on the ground in eastern Ukraine, the crisis only seems to have escalated. Nella Ayed reports.
A day that held so much promise started with none. In fact, it was worse. How precisely the violence began depends on who you talk to. But gunfire broke out, and it ended with 3 pro-Russian forces dead. A serious escalation on a day when many bravely hoped for the opposite. The day evolved, though, into both standoff and unspoken truce. On the pro-Russian side, they gathered to listen to the voice of Russian President Vladimir Putin on live radio, all the while praying their demands were being heard in Kiev and in Geneva.
Despite the mistrust, there seems to be a real willingness to tell their side of the story today. So they've let us in here behind the barricades at the regional headquarters to tell us this, that they're not exactly separatists. They want a Ukraine that will protect their interests.
We don't believe in Ukraine now. We don't believe. We don't want to believe in Ukraine now.
Later in the day, Ukrainians held their own protest, a rarity since an earlier gathering ended with clashes and a death.
I am very worried about my future, and I'm worried about my family, my wife, my children.
Seems the politicians listened. A long day of talks yielded an agreement almost no one saw coming. The priority, turning down the temperature in Ukraine.
And we are the first to understand and to agree that words on paper will only mean what the actions that are taken as a result of those words produce. So it is absolutely clear now that what is important is that these words are translated immediately into actions.
The gunmen would get amnesty. European monitors would be allowed in. And Kiev would be more inclusive of the pro-Russian demands in charting the future. There's still so much more to resolve, and that, the diplomats agreed, will be up to Ukrainians of all stripes. Nala Ayed, CBC News, Donetsk.
Rescuers in South Korea are frantically trying to save nearly 300 missing passengers aboard a capsized ferry. The boat went down carrying hundreds of teenagers on a school trip. Adam Walsh has the day's developments from Sejong City.
A new day brought new hope for finding survivors, but rescue divers couldn't even get close to the nearly 300 people believed trapped inside. We made 5 to 8 attempts, says this Coast Guard official. The problem for rescuers, winds and currents that were too strong. Today, the ship's captain, Lee Jung-suk, apologized. I am sorry and I am ashamed. I am at a loss for words. Police now have him in custody. Families of the passengers are furious. One reason, this announcement as the ferry was sinking. Do not move from where you are now. Don't move because it's more dangerous if you move. And also, witnesses say the captain and some crew were among the first off in one of only 2 lifeboats launched. At this hospital on the South Coast, devastated families of victims grieved as they were called to identify bodies. Most of the missing were from this high school. Their family and friends gathered in a classroom. This woman's grandchild is one of the missing. Where are you now, Ji-hoon? I'm anxious about your return with your mom and dad. Please come back to us alive, she says. This little girl survived the sinking, rescued by the Coast Guard. But her parents and brother are still missing. Late today, the president of the ferry company apologized. Executives and employees of the Cheonghae-jin Marine Office have committed a grave sin, he says. Korea's president has ordered an investigation and said those responsible will be punished. Meantime, rescuers wait for conditions to improve so divers can try to enter the submerged ship. Adam Walsh, CBC News, Sejong City, South Korea.
Here at home, the issue of mental illness is reportedly a significant one as Calgary police continue to investigate this week's mass murder. Police say officers are looking at any communication that 22-year-old suspect Matthew DeGrood had with people before 5 students in their 20s were stabbed to death at a house party. The Calgary Herald is reporting that DeGrood sent disjointed text messages to his family before showing up at that party and that they were worried that he might commit suicide.
There was a report that a 35-year-old man from the Netherlands is facing charges of harassment and extortion in the case of BC teenager Amanda Todd. The 15-year-old girl from Port Coquitlam killed herself in October 2012 after posting a YouTube video detailing her harassment. The media report says the man has already been held for 3 months and has been denied bail, but the man's lawyer says the case against his client is paper thin.
It started off as a sporty car that was both affordable and stylish, and it's become an icon of American muscle with a spirit all of its own. Today, the Ford Mustang is celebrating a milestone. It turns 50 years old.
This is the car that dreams are made of.
The Mustang made its debut at the 1964 New York World's Fair. It was a hit the moment it was introduced by then Ford executive Lee Iacocca. To mark the anniversary, Ford is embarking on a publicity stunt high above New York City. A 2015 limited edition Mustang is on display atop the Empire State Building, and it was no easy feat getting it there. The car was cut into 5 pieces, then brought up the elevator and reassembled. The yellow convertible will be on display until the end of the week. Let's take a look at today's market activity now. In Toronto, the TSX up 53 points to 14,500. Dow slipped 16 points to 16,408, and the NASDAQ edged up 9 points to 40.95. Our dollar virtually unchanged at 90.8 cents U.S. Gold down almost $10 to $1,293 an ounce. And oil climbed to over $104 a barrel. Well, night number 2 of the Stanley Cup playoffs tonight. One of the more entertaining series of the playoffs should get underway in St. Louis as the Blues take on the defending champion Hawks. Both teams coming in with some injury concerns.
Yeah, and we'll have that game 1 on Thunder Bay Television, CKPR at 8 o'clock tonight. We're going to work our way down to that prediction. We'll predict the other 3 series first there, Barry. Well, 4 Warriors series begin tonight in the Stanley Cup playoffs. Philadelphia visits the New York Rangers. It says here, the Blue Shirts in 6. Colorado hosts Minnesota. Watch for the Wild to advance in 7, even though the Avalanche owned them during the regular season. San Jose welcomes LA. The Kings will crown the Sharks in 6. And Barry's Blackhawks are in St. Louis, trying to become the first team to win back-to-back cups since Detroit did it in the late 1990s. Barry will be singing the blues. Yeah, you don't want to hear him sing. But St. Louis is going to win that in 7. And the Hawks will have sniper Patrick Kane and captain Jonathan Toews back from injury as they try and capitalize on the slumping Blues, who have lost 6 in a row. And as we mentioned, you can catch the game at 8 o'clock on Thunder Bay Television, CKPR.
I don't feel like I lost anything. It was only a short while to be away from playing games, and I think for anyone who's been playing right until the end of the season, this is going to be an adjustment with the speed of the playoffs. So everyone's going to have to step it up a little bit. So I think we'll all be excited, especially myself, in game 1. So hopefully that energy and that excitement can carry me through and give me enough to play at my best, I guess.
21 years since Montreal last won a Stanley Cup. That's the goal for the only Canadian team in the Stanley Cup playoffs this year as they opened their series with Tampa Bay in Florida last night. Midway, mark of the first, Nikita Kucherov takes a cross-ice pass. Watch from 5-hole, his first ever NHL playoff goal past Carey Price. But it didn't take Montreal long to respond. 19 seconds later, Tomas Plekanec creates his own space, unloads a rocket under the crossbar on Tampa tender Anders Lindback. Second period, Steven Stamkos reverts back to his Pee-wee days. What a solo rush, and it culminates in a beauty as he picks the low far corner on Price. Off to the third, Montreal takes its first lead. Lars Eller makes an impact after coming back from an injury with a go-ahead goal on the former Preds goalie. Now tied at 3. Big Thomas Vanek starts and finishes this rush as he heads to the net and taps in David Desharnais' cross-ice pass. But the Lightning tie it, and in overtime, Montreal will win it late. Daniel Briere feeds a wide-open Dale Weiss, and the former Vancouver Canuck ends it 5-4 for the Montreal Canadiens. And Pittsburgh Pens rally from 3 goals, from a 3-1 deficit to upend Columbus 4-3. Brandon Sutter with the game winner in Anaheim. The Ducks race out to a 4-0 lead, only to see Jamie Benn rally the Stars to within a goal. But Ryan Getzlaf, who ended up taking a Tyler Seguin shot in the face, his team, the Ducks, draw first blood in this series as they beat Dallas 4-3, the final. For the 8th time in 9 years, the Toronto Maple Leafs are watching rather than playing in these playoffs. And while many fans wait to see what they do to improve this summer, the question now is, who does Leaf Nation cheer for? With more on that, here's Rob Leth.
All right, Leafs Nation, your buds have been bounced. Shoot, scores! Now, as the NHL playoffs begin, it's time to choose a new team to cheer for.
I would suggest this is probably the most nightmarish scenario, Stanley Cup playoff-wise, for any fan of the Maple Leafs.
Leaf fans are used to being on the outside looking in, and it's not unusual to latch on to another Canadian team. But this year, that only leaves one option.
And the Montreal Canadiens have just tied the game.
But can people in Toronto actually root for the hated Habs?
Most likely, probably because they don't have another team to root for in the playoffs.
Well, it's the only Canadian team left anyway, isn't it? So there'll be a lot of Hab fans for sure.
The Montreal Canadiens are the only hope to bring the Stanley Cup back to this country, a feat no team has accomplished since the Canadiens way back in '93.
It's pretty disgusting because as a Leaf fan, you're not supposed to root for Montreal. I don't care about hockey playoffs if the Leafs aren't in it.
While the Canadiens may be a tough sell in the city, the province and the country is a different story. According to Facebook Canada, most of the nation is backing the Habs to go all the way, with Sidney Crosby and the Pittsburgh Penguins the only other team to get support north of the 49th.
Montreal really has earned the right to be where it is, and I don't think there's a true Leaf fan anywhere on earth that is happy about it.
There is also the argument that several American teams feature great Canadian players.
The most direct team would be the Tampa Bay Lightning, who play Montreal in the first round. So not only could they knock out your hated rival, but Steven Stamkos, a good Toronto boy. They wear blue and white, albeit a slightly different shade.
Go Habs go, or no Habs no. The choice is yours. Rob Leth, Global News.
The Northern Hawks are in Abbotsford, BC for the Keystone Cup Western Canada Junior B Hockey Championships. Their opener is against Selkirk, Manitoba, and they are late in the first period. 1-2 today for the Jays of Minnesota. The Twins break out in a big way in the 5th on far-away Dickey. Trevor Plouffe slaps a single to left. The speedy Brian Dozier sort of jogs in to make it 1-0. Then it's Jason Kubel. Adds the lead off the knuckleballer. He'll line a single to right. All-star game ambassador Joe Mauer makes it 2-0. Hosmil Pinto loves facing Dickey. He's batting over 400 in his career against him. Finds lots of real estate there for a double to score another run. It's a 5-run 5th for the Twins. Kurt Suzuki with an RBI sac fly to center. Kubel tags up. Dickey is headed for his 3rd loss of the year, but the Jays have only managed 2 runs for him so far this year. His record is 1-3, and in the second game of the doubleheader, we'll go at 7:10 tonight. And you can let the hype begin. For the first time in 6 years, the Toronto Raptors are in the NBA playoffs. They host Brooklyn Saturday afternoon at the Hangar, and there's plenty to be excited about. The team's coming off a franchise best season for wins, and they've released a new slick video. With more on that, here's Steven D'Souza.
We, the North. In many ways, we're in a league of our own. One step removed.
It's a bold statement, a new identity for a team even management thought wouldn't make it this far.
I didn't know it was going to come this quickly.
At the start of the season, few predicted the Toronto Raptors would become division champs. returning to the playoffs for the first time in 6 years, especially after dumping their biggest star mid-season.
Everybody thought after the Rudy Gay trade, the season was over, we're going to rebuild, and then they came together as a team, and they proved a lot of people wrong.
Some would say we're on the outside looking in.
This new promotional video was supposed to debut in the fall as part of the franchise rebrand. But with the team's surprise success, the timetable was moved up. It's an extension of the identity this team has built as hardworking and unselfish.
We know we're not just playing for the city of Toronto, we're playing for the country of Canada.
General Manager Masai Ujiri says the team is moving past the notion that good NBA talent won't come north of the border.
For me, that's all crap. It's all in the past. We're moving forward, and we hope Canada can stand tall.
It's a team with a chip on its shoulder.
Right now, I think we're just proving it, and right now I feel like we have so much more to prove, and we're still working, so it's about to pay off.
And even with so many young players making their playoff debut, the Raptors say they're not fazed.
Everybody keep talking to me like, bringing it up like it's rocket science, or I got no trigonometry or something. You just figure it out. Just go out there.
And they want everyone to know they've arrived.
If that makes us outsiders, we're in.
Steven D'Souza, CBC News, Toronto.
And inside the NBA, regulars Shaq and Brent Barry spoofed the scene from the classic movie Animal House, starring the late John Belushi.
We only want to hear classics like, I wish I had 50s girl. Get it? Classics. Classics, not that crap. I wish I had Jesse's girl. Da-na-na-na. Why can't I find the women like that?
Things like Phil. Sorry, Phil.
I don't sing. How would you know?
Well, you sing a lot better than he does, than Shaq.
Let's hope
well,
so.
Thanks.
Randy, of course, mentioned the Chicago Blackhawks St. Louis Blues game. Thank goodness tomorrow is Good Friday for a lot of hockey fans out there. Not one, but two games on this evening. You get to see them both with your complete rundown. Here's tonight's edition of Teletalk.
Tonight on Global Thunder Bay, starting at 8, it's Growing Up Fisher, and Mel needs a date for a charity event. At 8:30 on Working the Angles, Sandy organizes a funeral for her very much alive mother. At 9 on Parenthood, Amber struggles to let Ryan go, and Sarah addresses Hank's request. And at 10 on Elementary, Sherlock's nemesis may be responsible for a series of recent murders. Over on CKPR Thunder Bay at 8, Chicago is in St. Louis for the first game of Round 1. At 10:30, the San Jose Sharks will bare their teeth on home ice with the Los Angeles Kings. And at 1 a.m., it's a special very late edition of The National with Peter Mansbridge. Teletalk is brought to you by Points, the traffic ticket specialists.
Well, here's hoping, Phil, that the Easter Bunny doesn't have to strap on a pair of snowshoes over the weekend.
It's not looking like he and or she will have to, but might, as Barry mentioned earlier, still be a good idea if it was a snowshoe hare that came and delivered the eggs. Fortunately, it's looking like only today was when the snow was going to be falling. We hit our daytime high of 0 degrees only a few hours ago, and it's going to start dropping as we move into the overnight hours. Conditions across the country weren't too nice to many of the other provinces. Currently, Vancouver is sitting at 12 degrees under cloudy skies, a little bit of precipitation, but they're very fortunate because they missed a 10-centimeter dump of snow that just right next to them hit in the Fraser Valley area. Prince George right now is still under cloudy skies. They've been there all day. On the other side of the Rockies, Edmonton is currently sitting at -1 under cloudy skies, and they're seeing precipitation right now in the form of snow. If you're planning to travel out to Edmonton tonight, you should know that they're going to have potentially some pretty heavy snow moving in overnight, all through to tomorrow and overnight again into the weekend. Calgary is sitting at 2 degrees, and that trend is sticking quite true as we move across the prairies. Saskatoon is sitting at 2 degrees under partially cloudy skies. A little bit of snow right now. Regina, a little bit warmer under cloudy skies. Winnipeg, sunny and 2. However, they're also seeing a snowy winter storm system sitting just above them, which they could just sort of see the edge of as we move through tomorrow. Down in Toronto at this hour, they're currently sitting at 7 degrees under partially sunny and cloudy skies. And they took all day, like us, to reach that daytime high. That trend continued, in fact, for Ottawa, Montreal, and Quebec City. They're currently sitting at 5 and 7, and it did also take them all day to hit those highs. So really sort of a weird system we're under right now. Over on the East Coast, Fredericton is currently sitting under a beautiful sunny sky, a little bit brisk though at 3 degrees. Halifax, very similar. Charlottetown, a little bit colder out by the water. And as St. John's moves into the overnight hours, their temperature is expected to continue to drop, and they can see some snow moving on into the weekend, but probably not too much in the way of accumulation. What we saw today was a clear system move towards us as that precipitation is going to move out. It will continue to move out in the overnight hours in the northeast. Greenstone, we'll see a little bit going on into tomorrow, but not too much. For the majority of the region, it will be clear all day tomorrow. And as we move into Saturday, you can expect more of that rain to disappear as we see a strong chance of precipitation move in for Saturday. Overnight tonight, temperatures will continue to drop right across northwestern Ontario. Kenora is going to go down to 6 degrees. Fort Frances even colder at 11 degrees under partially cloudy skies, which is very similar for most of the region. Greenstone is down at -6 overnight, and Sault Ste. Marie, under partially cloudy skies, will go down to -3. As we move into the morning hours, things will warm up again, but we're still going to be below seasonal for this time of year. Mostly sun for the majority of the northwestern region. However, Greenstone, like I said, we'll see the tail end of the system that's finishing off with us right now as we go into the morning hours. Currently, sitting at 0 degrees still, which is nice. Snow will start to taper off as we move into the overnight hours, but the winds will start coming out of the east-northeast at 20 kilometers an hour, moving through the overnight. As we drop down to -4, temperatures will continue to drop as the winds slow down, just coming out of the northwest. However, for Good Friday, we are going to start to see a bit of a warm-up as that precipitation moves away. And as we look at the 5-day forecast, we can see that temperatures are expected to warm up quite a bit, especially in the tail end of the weekend and on into next week.
Well, it's time now to visit the Thunder Bay and District Humane Society shelter. This week, Fiona Gardner introduces us to a dog named Charlie.
Hi, this week's Humane Society Pet of the Week is a real handsome devil. This is Charlie, and Charlie is an Akita cross. He is 1 year old and he is looking for a new home. He loves kids. He's got lots of energy and he's very smart. He's got a little bit of training, but as you can see, He just wants to please. So if you can look into these beautiful eyes and tell him that you've got a home that is perfect for him, well, he will do everything he can to make your life even better with him in it. Drop by the Humane Society and come meet Charlie today.
Your Pet of the Week has been brought to you by Thunder Pet. Expert advice and high-quality pet food within your budget.
It seems almost everyone with a cell phone is into shooting selfies these days, and unfortunately most of them are a little bit dumb. When we come back, we're going to show you one that's got to go to the Dumb Selfie Hall of Fame. That's coming up right after these words. Well, it's being called a selfie fail. You'll see why in a second. Take a look.
Wow, that guy kicked me in the head!
He sure did. This short clip posted on YouTube today has gone viral with over 1.5 million views so far. Now, this teenager wanted to pose for a picture in front of a passing train. Turns out the train's engineer wasn't too keen on that idea. So, he gave the young man a swift boot to the head for his prank. I'm thinking both of them may want to rethink their approach on this little episode. Just dumb all the way around.
Well, to recap our top story of the day, Old Man Winter has definitely arrived, and that caused over a dozen accidents across the city.
And 4 more first-round Stanley Cup playoff series start up tonight, and we'll bring you a doubleheader on Thunder Bay Television CKPR beginning at 8 o'clock.
If you're looking to do a Easter egg hunt for the kids outdoors, just keep in mind that although Sunday will be warm, up around 10 degrees, it will have rained on Saturday, so things might still be a bit soggy.
And that'll do it for tonight's look at news, weather, and sports. A reminder for News on Demand, log on to tvnewswatch.com. Thank you all for being with us, and have a terrific Easter holiday weekend.